Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar today hosted by Canadian Wood. The duration of this webinar is for 1 hour, a presentation followed by Q&A. I would now like to begin the webinar by handing over to Pranesh for a short welcome note. Pranesh, over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome you once again on behalf of FII India to a Canadian Wood webinar, Best Practices in Manufacturing of Furniture, the fourth in a series being organized by us to share information on sustainability, forestry, details on wood species and lumber, best practices in manufacturing, and above all, respond to your often asked queries. In fact, we encourage you to keep typing in your questions while the presentation is on. It helps us to collate and bunch similar questions together and thus answer a large number of people together. My colleagues, Peter and Ajay, will try and answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session after the presentation. However, those that remain unanswered due to time constraint will certainly be answered one-on-one by email after the webinar by us. Those who have joined for the first time, we are not for-profit Crown Agency of the Government of British Columbia, the westernmost province of Canada. Supported by the federal government, our mandate is to promote Canadian wood species in the offshore markets by spreading education, creating awareness, apart from hand-holding and technical support. My colleague and our technical advisor, Peter Bradfield, will cover this and much more in detail in his presentation today. So without any further delay, I invite Peter to begin the webinar, which I hope you will find interesting and beneficial at the same time. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Pranesh. Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to this webinar today, and a special welcome to those of you who are joining one of our Canadian Wood presentations for the first time. Today we're going to talk about best practices in manufacturing, in manufacturing with wood, and why Canadian wood. Canadian Wood, the organisation, is a Crown agency of the Government of British Columbia, as Pranesh mentioned. BC is the westernmost province of Canada, and we have a mandate to promote Canadian forest products in the export markets. So we are a not-for-profit organisation, fully funded by the BC government and the Canadian federal government, and we don't engage in any commercial activity. So I'd like to commence this session with a 5-minute video shot in British Columbia, which gives an overview of the Canadian lumber industry and will lead us into best practices to be employed when working with Canadian species in manufacturing. So please bear with me while I just set up this video.
There are few places on Earth that can match the diversity and richness of Canada's forests. Forests are an important part of Canada's natural ecosystem and central to its economy, making up just under half of its landscape with 8 major forest regions and a vast diversity of wood species. From planting a seedling to manufacturing lumber, the forest sector in British Columbia and Canada is an interconnected industry of forest management and wood processing. This includes planting, tree harvesting with modern, high-tech machinery, and sophisticated wood product manufacturing. The entire cycle is planned around responsible resource management. In British Columbia, forestry and wood product manufacturing are a fabric of our culture, our communities, and our people. Our forests provide a sustainable supply of wood for lumber and mass timber products, while protecting our environmental and social values of wildlife, water, community, economic interests, and First Nations peoples. British Columbia is a global leader in sustainable forest management. Forestry practices in British Columbia ensure that environmental, social, and economic needs are met for current and future generations. This matters to our customers and sets us apart from other supply regions globally. Wood products from British Columbia come from legal, sustainably managed forests. By law, less than 1% of the forests are harvested annually, with 3 trees planted for every single tree harvested. This commitment to forest regeneration results in 200 million new seedlings planted every year, ensuring replenished forests for the future. Canadian wood suppliers provide certified products under the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC, and the Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification, PEFC. These strict international certification standards add additional assurance of the global protection of forest resources and make Canada a reliable and sustainable provider of wood products. State-of-the-art technology and machinery, incorporated in our forestry practices and through our highly productive, efficient sawmills, support the production of Canada's quality lumber. After harvesting, logs are transported to sawmills for manufacturing. At the sawmill, the logs are cut to target lengths and loaded into a debarking machine to remove the bark. Next, logs are processed through primary breakdown equipment like head rigs and chip-n saws and are turned into lumber. The lumber is then sawed to specific widths and trimmed to specific lengths as it passes through secondary equipment like edgers and trimmers. A scanner will show if the lumber requires any further trimming. Next, the lumber is sorted by thickness, width, length, and sometimes by grade attribute. It is stacked, which may include stacking on sticks for kiln drying. When the lumber is dry, it is ready for final processing. Some lumber goes through a planer mill to be made smooth. Whether planed or rough, the lumber is then graded and trimmed. It is sorted by size and by grade, then finally packaged for shipment. This results in the most efficient yield of the best quality lumber. Once the lumber is packaged and prepared for shipment, it is loaded onto a network of trucks and rail cars for delivery to shipping ports for distribution around the world. Independent studies confirm that the CO2 stored in wood products far outweighs any extra CO2 generated by the efficient manufacturing and shipping of Canadian lumber around the world. Lumber produced from British Columbia and Canada is durable, strong, and versatile. Superior working properties offer design flexibility and durability. Canadian lumber products can be bent, shaped, or assembled as required, making it ideal for countless indoor, outdoor, and structural applications such as windows, doors, gazebos, and furniture like tables and chairs. Canadian wood species are also easy to face laminate, edge glue and/or finger joint, and standard sizes and grades ensure that the same high-quality product reaches the client each time. Canadian wood products bring warmth and natural beauty to an interior and exterior application or furniture product. It can be sanded to create a smooth surface, has a superior coating adherence, and can easily take any stain or finish. Across Canada and North America, wood products are influencing design and construction, not only for interior and exterior applications, but also the construction of buildings. Mass timber products are changing the way buildings are constructed, allowing for immense spans and taller buildings made of wood. Canadian wood products are being used in a wide range of buildings and products, showcasing the versatility, strength, and durability of lumber from Canadian forests. That is why using Canadian wood is a natural choice.
Okay, I'm back. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I'm always impressed with the statistic that we plant more than 200 million seedlings every year in BC. Canadian Wood has partnered with many manufacturers in India with a mutual interest in evaluating those Canadian species for suitability, workability, finishing and performance through product trials. Many of those trials have resulted in furniture and door jamb programs, for example, using Canadian wood. So what are the Canadian species I'm referring to, and what are the benefits of Canadian wood in particular? Here is a quick overview of our unique Canadian varieties. In Canadian wood, we have 5 distinct species available, and you will see many examples throughout this presentation as to how these species are used. These are large trees, 100 feet and taller in many cases, and rarely harvested under 100 years of age. So Canada's forests are old growth, natural forests. The logs are large girth and the wood is fine grained, mature and stable. Unlike most pine species offered by other countries, four of our 5 Canadian species are available in clear grades, which are ideal for high-end furniture and joinery. 2 of our Canadian species are naturally durable. Most importantly, our Canadian species are versatile. Take Western Hemlock, for instance. This species turns, planes and shapes well and can be sanded to a smooth finish. Fine grained and available in clear grades, Western Hemlock is recommended for internal furniture and mouldings, yet can also be used in structural applications, doors and windows. SPF, or Spruce-Pine-Fir, comprising 3 or 4 species, which are harvested and processed together. This is a mix of 100-year-old fine-grained wood from the interior forest of BC. Graded and stamped to meet North American structural codes, SPF is medium density with high strength, which means not only is it used for house construction or house framing in North America and prefab tongue and groove housing in India, but also for doors, windows, furniture and fit outs. So very versatile species. Douglas-Fir, one of the best known species in the world for building and construction. This species has been used for more than 150 years in export markets all over the world. So while Douglas-Fir is best known for its structural properties, you can see the clear joinery grade used to create this panel door on this slide. Many Indian customers are attracted to Douglas-Fir due to its appearance, colour palette and grain. Yellow cedar, fine grain, easy to work and easy on tools. Yellow cedar grows so slowly it requires more than 200 years to reach a marketable size. It's durable and ideal for outdoor applications where termites and decay are an issue. It has an enormous following in India for door jambs, doors and windows and furniture. And last but not least, in our 5 species is Western red cedar. Durable and extremely dimensionally stable, termite and decay resistant, and available in clear grades, the applications for this species are endless. So it's important to note that all of these species and all Canadian wood arriving in India is sawn finished lumber with excellent working properties, which brings us to our focus today. So what is it we mean by manufacturing and what do we mean by best practices? Well, before we get into best practices, let me show you some manufactured products, such as these decorative panels for furniture and interiors made from thinly sliced yellow cedar lumber, and most importantly, made in India. I'm pleased to say all of the products featured in this webinar today, without exception, are made in India using Canadian wood. And we do have wonderful examples of furniture, door jambs and doors, windows, panelling, artifacts, cabinetry and joinery, outdoor products, and many more. However, in today's presentation, we'll focus on furniture. In this slide, we see beautifully hand-painted tables and hand-carved chairs in Western Hemlock, made by Delhi-based Bramola. Western Hemlock drop-leaf table and chest of drawers. Western Hemlock dining table and chairs, stained and unstained. And a Western Hemlock table on steel frame, made in Jodhpur with a dark stain applied as requested by the customer. The thing about tables is that Construction requires edge gluing of planks, which demands a knowledge and skill set in order to execute successfully. But it's not just tabletops, is it? It's also doors, furniture panels, even chopping boards. In every case, we are required to join lumber by gluing to make a single wide piece. And there lies a challenge, quite a major challenge, which we'll discuss a bit later on. In India, the most widely used and recommended Canadian species for furniture is Western Hemlock. Seen here is this Western Hemlock sofa and simple bench seat. Chairs with attractive stain resembling a hardwood look. Upholstered chair with chest of drawers by Bramola. Western Hemlock bunk bed with paint and sofa with teak stain. Again, versatile Western Hemlock, carved, hand painted and stained. Western Hemlock cabinet made in Jaipur and complements the manufacturer's existing range of mango wood, shisham and acacia products. Western Hemlock cabinet with white PU coating made in Jodhpur. Painted Western Hemlock cabinetry and bedroom furniture by Mars Furniture in Mysore. And original designer pieces in Western Hemlock. Bathroom vanity by Mars and four-poster bed by Jaipur-based Gulmar Lane. Beautiful bed. Speaking of beds and Western Hemlock, this one comes from Tech Workshop in Chennai. This by Bramola in Delhi. And this Western Hemlock sleigh bed made in Rajasthan. In yellow cedar, this bed is by Evo Wood in Delhi. Yellow cedar is a popular choice for furniture after Western Hemlock. As in this yellow cedar upholstered armchair by Gulmar Lane. Beautiful work. Yellow cedar bathroom cabinets and wardrobe by Evo Wood, Delhi. More designer pieces by Nasik-based Bearweather. And this stunning piece in yellow cedar from SLV, Bangalore. In Canadian wood, we can rely on beautiful fine grains, as can be seen in these furniture components in yellow cedar and Douglas-Fir. This Douglas-Fir bar cabinet and stool set comes from Wheaton Design in Jaipur, and the turned Douglas-Fir post by Helios Decor, Mysore. Beautifully crafted Douglas-Fir furniture pieces by Renown Retail in Mumbai. Casual dining by Mars in Mysore. And this unstained Douglas-Fir cabinet featuring open grain. So just to complete our Made in India slides today, I have just a few more examples in other species, such as this 16-foot SPF dining table made on site in Himachal. The carpenter elected to finger joint 4-foot lengths, then edge glued the boards, ensuring the finger joints were staggered, making a strong, straight and stable tabletop. Western Red Cedar picnic table by SLV, Bangalore. Ideal in outdoor settings due to its natural durability and of course quite beautiful. Again, lovely work using Western Red Cedar to make unique al fresco furniture pieces by lavish line Vadodara. Clearly, there are furniture manufacturers all over India, in all climates, from Rajasthan to Kerala, who are successfully using Canadian species in a comprehensive range of products for both internal consumption and for export. Of course, none of this quality manufacturing happens without skilled workers and a love of working with wood. Yet, I do feel many manufacturers need to know a little bit more, or at least refresh, when it comes to the points listed on this slide. Namely, understanding wood properties a little better, understanding grade selection in Canadian species, understanding seasoning and acclimatization to equilibrium moisture content, also understanding storage and handling of lumber, and applying the properties, grading and EMC to manufacturing processes, such as machining and product handling and wood coating. Among the first things to understand is that Canadian lumber is kiln-dried and heat-treated, or as we say, KDHT, as we saw in the video. KD lumber is wood that has gone through a carefully monitored drying process in a kiln, during which temperature and humidity are controlled in order to eliminate moisture from the wood. Heat-treated lumber is specifically heated to a much higher temperature. It's done in the same kiln, but not for the purpose of drying, rather to eliminate any insects or pathogens that may be present in the wood. This is a requirement under India's import regulations. Typically, Canadian coastal species intended for manufacturing are dried to 12 to 14% average moisture content in a gentle and exacting process, which may require 2 to 3 weeks in the kiln. So after grading, kiln drying, heat treating, and packaging, significant value has been added to the sawn lumber. Note the export packaging includes tight stacking, strapping to attach dunnage to avoid forklift damage, cardboard base and corner protection prior to banding, and barcode labelling. This particular wood is a vertical grain Douglas-Fir doorstop. It's really quite valuable, and much care is taken in the packaging. KD wood is bagged for weather and moisture protection. Then it travels in a container from the Northern Hemisphere to India via the equator. Now, this is a lot to ask. Since all wood is hygroscopic, we can understand the moisture content of lumber will be affected by changes in temperature and humidity inside the container in transit. So how do we manage our investment? This is a really important question and critical to your business plan. So please take a minute to check the points on this slide. When you receive the wood, please do check the moisture content with a good quality moisture meter. It can be a digital type surface meter, that's fine. Make sure you select planks from the middle layers of the pack, and perhaps check about 10% of the boards in each pack. Be sure to measure the moisture content in the middle of each board and set aside those boards that are reading a little more than say 14% for stickering later. In fact, after segregating those higher moisture content pieces, my best practice advice would actually be to place all the wood on stickers, not just the high moisture content, but all the wood on stickers, irrespective of moisture content. So why place KD wood on stickers, you may ask? Well, the reason is explained here. Seasoned wood is going to continue to absorb or lose moisture, depending on the surrounding temperature and humidity. After seasoning and upon exposure at a given location, wood attains the equilibrium moisture content at that location. So it's important to understand that wood, even though it's kiln dried, if it has a moisture content above the local EMC, it will lose further moisture. Whereas conversely, if it has a lower moisture content than the location, then it will absorb moisture. So allowing seasoned wood to acclimatise to its surroundings will keep the moisture movement and resultant defects to a minimum. This is really important to understand. Because when wood arrives in India, it's distributed to all corners of the country, each geography having its own microclimate. And there's a direct relationship between relative humidity in that location and EMC. As we see on this chart, wood located in Delhi, for instance, falls under zone 2, which is the yellow zone, where EMC averages 8 to 9%. So if wood is 12 to 14% when it arrives in Delhi, it will lose moisture to the atmosphere to match the Delhi EMC. And only when acclimatized to Delhi's 8 to 9% will it be ready for manufacturing. Now, if KD lumber arrives in Mumbai with 12 to 14% moisture content, it's going to match Mumbai's zone 3 EMC, which is also 12 to 14%. So not much to do there, but if that wood is moved inland, for instance, to Pune, it will need to acclimatize to Pune's zone 2, again, yellow zone, 8 to 9% EMC. So because we have this variable EMC in different locations, I think it's an excellent practice to take the wood, place it on stickers, at the same time getting a good look at the boards and allowing some air circulation throughout the boards and allowing that wood to acclimatise. Most of the defects and problems encountered in wood storage and manufacturing result from moisture content, you see, and inadequate preparation at the factory. Potential defects such as checking, splitting and wood movement can be reduced or eliminated by acclimatising on stickers. And when placing lumber on stickers, we have a great opportunity to inspect the lumber. Remember, it is the buyer's responsibility to understand the grade purchased and the defects allowed under that grade. So if you notice any problems while stickering, now is the time to advise your supplier without delay. Note the careful arrangement in placing boards on stickers. Ensure the stickers are vertically aligned and spaced evenly every 18 to 24 inches along the length of the pack, as we see here. Stickers should commence within 1 inch of the end of the pack, and the pack should be elevated on dunnage at least 4 to 6 inches above the ground. Placing extra weight on top of the packs will help to keep everything flat. I think this pack in this slide is obviously outside, so they've placed a metal protection over the top. That wouldn't be necessary inside a warehouse. Other tips include spacing boards, say 1 inch apart horizontally, which allows air circulation around each individual board. Using a vapor barrier on the ground, again, which is going to inhibit any hygroscopic movement of moisture from the ground into the wood. And if you intend splitting or ripping boards to a smaller dimension, for example, if your 2x6 is being resawn to 1x6 blanks, it's always better to air dry the blank size. So in that case, you would resaw the 2x6 when it arrived, and then you would air dry or sticker the 1x6 blanks to acclimatise those blanks. Our next concern must be handling and storing of the lumber. You've made an investment now in this value-added wood, so it's important to train your workers to handle it with care and not as a commodity. After all, a lot of effort has gone into the sawmilling, grading, sorting, drying, export packaging, moisture checking, and perhaps even stickering. So packages should be protected from direct sun and exposure to moisture and dust, preferably in a well-ventilated warehouse or at least under an awning roof, as we see here. Stacking in an organised way should be relatively simple, since we will have arranged our wood on stickers by species, size and grade. As mentioned earlier, it's imperative we understand the grade of the wood purchased. Typically, for furniture manufacturing, we use a clear grade or a shop grade or a combination. And we should understand the difference in labour inputs and recovery for each grade. For instance, shop grade is a remanufacturing grade, which requires chopping out defects to recover clear pieces, whereas clear grade will be almost 100% usable. Naturally, these grades must be segregated. Once drywood is transferred to the factory, best practice informs that it should be stacked on dunnage, pallets or racks in an organised way, according to species, size and grade, and clearly labelled. Now our wood has been resawn and acclimatised, it's ready for our manufacturing process. But there's one more important step, and that is grain selection. Output from Canadian mills is predominantly flat sawn, although lumber packages will often contain a mix of flat grain and vertical grain, otherwise known as quarter sawn. So if we get a pack with both flat grain and vertical grain, we might call that a mixed grain. Vertical grain is often known as quarter sawn, flat grain is flat grain. In India, flat sawn lumber is popular because of its floral grain pattern. However, there can be a downside to flat grain lumber. Therefore, precautions in manufacturing and assembly must be observed. In order to make good choices, we should have some understanding of wood movement. Tangential wood movement is along the growth rings and is the direction of the greatest movement. Radial wood movement means perpendicular to the growth rings, and movement in this direction is smaller than in the tangential direction by a factor of 2 in 5, or 40% less. Longitudinal wood movement, as you can see, is along the grain, parallel to the grain. But longitudinal movement is negligible and it's usually ignored. In simple terms, lumber shrinks and expands mostly across its width and measurably in thickness, but much less. What is important to understand is that flat grain boards will shrink twice as much in width or more compared to vertical grain boards. And flat grain boards will also have more tendency to cut, particularly in wider boards. These are examples of vertical grain, which can also be very beautiful and will achieve a high-end look. Vertical grain can be specified in shop grades and clear grades, and VG will be the most stable, providing superior performance in flooring and edge-glued panels, for instance. For some applications, best practice means astute grain selection. So be careful with board selection and choose wisely. In any event, make allowance for wood movement. For instance, in TNG boards, the groove must always be deeper than the tongue. 1/8 of an inch is sufficient to provide a gap to accommodate that shrinkage and swelling due to changes in humidity. Earlier on, I said we discussed reality that when joining lumber by edge gluing, we are in effect making a single wide piece, which behaves accordingly. That is, the panel now behaves like one very wide board, and there lies the challenge. That challenge is mainly to do with board selection when assembling the panel, grain selection and grain orientation. This slide tells us that a flat sawn 1-inch tabletop may shrink 4 times more in width than a 2-inch vertical grain tabletop. Of course, depending on the species. That's a big difference. Now, naturally, glue line, clamping pressure and duration, workshop environment and technique is important, but a good understanding of the wood's behaviour is essential. Here we see that clamping should be done on both sides of the panel with uniform pressure to avoid cupping. Immediately after clamping a glued panel, its surface level must be checked and, if necessary, adjusted using a wedge. And correct grain orientation of planks should have been taken care of during clamping. Grain orientation means arranging boards in such a way that shrinkage or swelling in one board is counteracted or balanced by opposite movement in an adjacent board. If flat grain wood is used, reversing the direction of the grain in adjacent boards helps to prevent the panel from warping. Although in a tabletop it may tend to give a wavy appearance. So on this slide we see flat grain boards arranged with alternate grain direction, that is heart side down, heart side up, heart side down, etc. This is just good practice, and often it's not observed. I've noticed that in India. We can also see a step due to differential wood movement in a flat grain board adjacent to a vertical grain board. This can also be difficult to manage. So in the case of a tabletop or door panel, vertical grain material is the best choice and hence best practice. Not so common in furniture manufacture, but sometimes required for furniture legs, for instance, or posts, is face lamination. So in this slide, we see various grain orientations, but which is the best choice? In my opinion, the best practice is sap to sap or heart to heart. So in the top row, B is the best option, sap to sap, followed by C, which is heart to heart. And in the bottom row, where we have 3 boards laminated, E is correct, where we have sap to sap and heart to heart in the same pieces. So I think we can see that in manufacturing, the moisture content of the wood at the time of processing is crucial and must be known. And wood behaviour must be known and understood. So best practice is essential, which means close attention to moisture content, moisture differential, board selection, grain orientation, and product assembly. Wood is forgiving, but we must allow for movement, as I mentioned earlier, over the life of the product. We do that by allowing joints to expand and contract. For example, when employing breadboard ends on a tabletop, we must use elongated slots and oversized mortises in our rail, thereby allowing our panel to move in the direction of the arrows. This is simply good engineering, demonstrating a knowledge of wood movement. In other joinery products, by engineering suitable glue joints for each application, we can force a joint to stay tight by employing biscuits, splines, or dowels. As usual in most things, detailing is the key. Remember, when we attach a horizontal rail across a vertical panel, as in a desk with drawer runners, for example, or when fastening a tabletop to its frame, we must allow the panel to move by fastening through elongated slots or by using appropriate hardware, properly fastened. Failure to attach rails and panels as recommended may result in splitting through the panel due to stress caused by inhibited movement. Here are some examples of suitable fasteners and fastening. Note the enlarged or elongated holes, and a washer is used for the metal bracket, and elongated holes in the wooden block. Another effective method for fastening a tabletop is the use of metal or wood clips, which allow the panel to move. Again, this is necessary because wood tends to expand and contract due to variations in humidity. If a top is fastened securely on the apron and the wood shrinks, joints may pull apart. To prevent this, the top must be held in place yet be able to move. And of course, during a product's lifetime, moisture is the most important factor impacting upon the performance of the finish. So again, best practice is essential for the prevention of excessive moisture buildup in the wood, whatever our product. Therefore, after final sanding in the factory, be sure to apply your chosen wood coating without delay in a controlled environment. Follow the manufacturer's directions and do not skimp on the sequence of steps, drying times, or number of coats. Coating of all surfaces, including unseen surfaces, with particular attention to end grains, serves as a barrier to moisture and will ensure a long service life for your product and reward you with happy customers, I'm sure. Now, I don't intend getting into detailed step-by-step machining and coating today because you guys are the manufacturing professionals, not me. However, in wrapping up, I would like to leave you with some key reminders when it comes to best practices when working with Canadian wood. When the wood arrives, please do remove the bags, check the moisture content, segregate the boards by moisture content, and allow the wood to acclimatise at the manufacturing location. Understand the grade being used and be selective when choosing individual boards. Check the moisture content again and discard any boards above EMC for further acclimatisation if necessary. Check boards for defects which may need to be removed before machining, and check the grain if you want to select for flat grain or vertical grain. For best machining results, it is critical to use sharp blades and correct setup. Remember, optimum knife angles differ for hardwood versus softwood, and sometimes even between softwood species. Similarly, optimum feed speeds can differ between species, and skilled in-feed operators will check boards for grain direction and the best face for processing before feeding each board. Most of the time, quality control is more important and more valuable to you than rapid feed. If using flat grain to make panels, remember to check grain orientation and ensure that there's less than 2% moisture variation in the adjacent boards. This is quite important. Store any panels or profiled boards which are work in progress away from the floor and wall surfaces. You know, if you're storing stuff overnight, keep it up, elevated off the ground, and place weight on any stacks that are stored overnight. Floorboards, for example, and I know that's not furniture, but they're a special case, should be stored for some days in the actual room in which they're going to be installed, with the doors and windows and AC all in active use to resemble normal living conditions. Sometimes that's the extent we need to go to acclimatise our product. That's particular to floorboards, not so much to furniture. Please remember, best practice starts and ends with your recognition that joinery grade lumber is a valuable resource. Canadian wood is no exception, so please treat it with care and respect your investment. I'm going to leave it there. I'd like to say a big thank you from me and the team at Canadian Wood for attending this webinar. I hope it's been informative and you will consider using Canadian Wood for your furniture manufacturing. We are at your service at all times. So before I leave you, we will open up the session to questions. So let's now see if we have some questions that have been passed to our moderator, RJ. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for the very informative session. And welcome again, everyone. And thank you so much for the overwhelming response to this webinar. This is our fourth in the series. The first three we conducted in the structural applications. This one is for the reman applications and specifically focus on furniture. Lots of questions. We have around 15 minutes window to answer these questions, but don't worry, even if some of your questions are unanswered, at the end of this session, we will make sure that you know, everyone gets, at least in your mailbox, all questions will be answered. Okay. And I have also received a request if we can explain certain aspects in Hindi and whether the questions can be asked in Hindi. The answer is yes. I have also put it in chat mode, that feel free to ask questions in English or Hindi, and we will be, we will get back to you rather on those all the questions. The first question is about the species, Peter. You explain all the 5 species. Which species are apt for furniture manufacturing in particular is the question.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. So I guess I did emphasise that we suggest Western Hemlock in the majority of cases for interior furniture. We recommend Western Hemlock. It's most suitable, very easy to work. It has a wonderful staining acceptance. You can make Western Hemlock look like anything. Lots of advantages. But the truth is our species are so versatile that you can use any of them for furniture, and we see all of those species are used for furniture. I think I showed you examples of each species, but predominantly Western Hemlock. There is a yellow cedar following and Douglas-Fir following. Probably that's where I'd leave it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Western Hemlock is the answer. Yes. And we have got fair amount of success in interior applications in Western Hemlock. For exterior applications, what species? Okay, I mean, that's both the cedars. I think Peter explained that in the presentation. Yellow cedar as well as Western red cedar both can be used for outdoor applications. Those are naturally durable. टर्माइट रेजिस्टेंस प्रॉपर्टीज है दोनों सीडर के अंदर और नेचुरली ड्यूरेबल है, तो सन रेन डिफरेंट वेदर एलिमेंट्स को वो सस्टेन कर सकते हैं दोनों सीडर. और इंटीरियर एप्लीकेशन, जहां तक फर्नीचर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का सवाल है या पैनलिंग या जो भी इंटीरियर एप्लीकेशंस है, वहां पे ज्यादातर वेस्टर्न हेमलॉक का इस्तेमाल होता है. Okay, the next question related to species again is about SYP. मैं clarify करना चाहूंगा कि SYP Canadian species नहीं है. SYP is not a Canadian species. It is from United States. So SYP के बारे में हम ज्यादा जानकारी दे नहीं पाएंगे, बट क्या वो इस्तेमाल करने में आती है, तो इक्विवेलेंट स्पीशीज है उसकी SPF, स्प्रूस पाइन एंड फर. ये 3 स्पीशिया वुड स्पीशीज है जो एक साथ हार्वेस्ट होती है. सिमिलर कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स एंड सिमिलर लुक एंड फील आता है उसका, तो उसको स्प्रूस पाइन फर SPF कहा जाता है. एंड SPF सही मायने में कैनेडियन वुड है, ना कि SYP, है ना. Okay.
Just the point I'd make there, Jay, with SYP, I did mention that Canadian wood, we offer 5 species. There are various pines being offered in India. SYP is just one. They tend to be quite coarse-grained, often will contain heart sensors because they're a structural grade. And yes, you can make furniture from pines, but generally it's more rustic appearance, with knotty look and kind of rougher surface. The difference I'm saying between that and Canadian species like hemlock and Western red cedar and yellow cedar is that we have high grades which yield clear wood without any defects. So you can make very high-line, beautiful furniture pieces from joinery grade lumber. Joinery grade lumber is not available in pine in general.
The next question is about pricing. I mean, it's being asked whether we get, how are they priced? Then there is another question about pricing saying that we usually use mango wood, which is 500 to 700 rupees. How are Canadian species priced? And, 1,000 rupees plus, that kind of a price point, can we afford to use it? So, uske liye ek jawab hai, and this question is in Hindi, Peter. So I'll try and answer, give some perspective about pricing first. ऐसा है कि यहाँ 500-600 रुपया में रॉ मटेरियल प्राइस आता है और आपको वुड मिलती है. कैनेडियन वुड स्पीशीज भी काफी अट्रैक्टिवली प्राइस है, और ये स्पीशीज साइज ग्रेड कॉम्बिनेशन के हिसाब से इसका प्राइसिंग डिसाइड होता है. तो क्या आपको 600-700 रुपए में मिल सकती है? जवाब हाँ है, डिपेंडिंग ऑन क्या ग्रेड और क्या साइज आप लेना चाहते हैं. तो अलग अलग स्पीशीज है, 5 स्पीशीज का रेंज है और काफी रेंज वेरी करती है. 600 रुपए से लेके 3000 रुपए घन फुट तक आपको आ सकती है. लेकिन आपको जिस साइज में चाहिए वो हर पीस उसी साइज में आता है, कंसिस्टेंटली साइज है. केडी होत के आता है। दूसरा स्पीशीज जहां आप कंपेयर कर रहे हैं वो शायद गीली लकड़ी आती है, ये सूखी लकड़ी है। 10 to 12 एवरेज मॉइस्चर के हिसाब से आपको सप्लाई की जाती है। अगर आपको स्ट्रक्चरल ग्रेड की लकड़ी चाहिए तो 15 से 18% मॉइस्चर के हिसाब से भी आपको मिल सकती है। आपको सिर्फ उसको एक्लेमेटाइज करके इस्तेमाल करना होता है। तो काफी सारी चीजें उसमें इन्वॉल्व है कि आपकी प्रोसेस कॉस्ट क्या है, कॉस्ट ऑफ कन्वर्जन क्या है, तो सही मायने में काफी सारी जगहों पे जो बड़ी मात्रा में वुड एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं उन्होंने इसका महत्व समझा है, और खास करके हमें बेहतर सक्सेस मिली है वेस्टर्न हेमलॉक स्पीशीज के अंदर, जहां पे लोगों ने उसका इस्तेमाल करना समझ लिया है। प्रोडक्टिविटी के हिसाब से उनका वेस्टेज कम हो रहा है, उनका यील्ड ज्यादा आ रहा है। तो आप असेंबली लाइन के ऊपर अगर आप रन करेंगे फ्रॉम रॉ मटेरियल परचेज स्टेज टू your raw material at the input and eventual output, तो उसके हिसाब से अगर आप कॉस्टिंग करेंगे तो वेस्टर्न हेमलॉक ने काफी सारी इश्यूज रिजॉल्व कर लिए हैं। ऑपरेशनल कॉस्ट कम हुई है, वेस्टेज कम हुआ है। और ये उदाहरण के तहत अगर आप भी ज्यादा मात्रा में लार्ज क्वांटिटी में कोई ट्रायल करना चाहते हैं तो हम आपस में बातचीत करके एज पर द मेरिट वी कैन सजेस्ट यू राइट कॉम्बिनेशन, और उस तरह से आप खुद कन्विंस हो सकते हैं उस ट्रायल के बाद whether that kind of combination is suitable for you. But in general प्राइसिंग स्पीशीज के तहत नहीं होती, स्पीशीज साइज और ग्रेड तीनों फैक्टर जरूरी होते हैं। अनदर क्वेश्चन रिलेटेड टू दिस पीटर इज cortosan lumber is available in our species? The answer is again yes, vertical grain or cortosan lumber अगर आप चाहें तो you have to specify that product and you will get that offer, in all the species, whether it's yellow cedar, hemlock or Douglas-Fir or otherwise, you can specify and you can get it.
I would just say, Ajay, in terms of the question on mango wood, it's difficult just to answer that on price in isolation, because you really have to consider recovery. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of benefits with Western Hemlock in terms of, I think you mentioned the grading and the sizing. The actual recovery, the pace through the manufacturing facility, and certainly sanding and machining, much finer finish, much nicer finish, much more quality product from hemlock than mango wood. But we love mango wood. The export market loves mango wood, and it should be used. It's a great product. But certainly hemlock, there's a place for hemlock to reinforce that. We see that in Rajasthan quite a lot.
So next question is about acclimatization, Peter, and they're saying that it's a seasoned wood. Do you really need to acclimatize this once again?
Yes.
And yeah, and there is a question inside this question. They're also asking, can you explain the grain direction a bit more? Although you covered in the presentation, but they would want to understand the types of grains and how do you differentiate?
Well, flat grain, simply said, is when you see that nice floral pattern on the face of the board, we call that flat grain. I showed an example of vertical grain where you virtually have parallel lines along the face of the board, and if you look at the end of the board, you'll see those lines on the end of the board. So vertical grain, just because of the direction of the grain, as I explained, it shrinks much less. It's much less affected by moisture than flat grain. And so we need to separate the flat grain from the vertical grain. Not always, but certainly important when you're edge gluing boards. I also showed rift grain, which is a kind of version of, it's kind of in between flat and vertical grain. That's kind of more smaller part of the volume. It's mainly the vertical grain versus flat grain I'm talking about, and choosing according to your product.
Yeah, so you mentioned about board. The next question is about board. Are finger joint boards readily available for any of the Canadian wood species? And if yes, what thicknesses they are available?
Well, yeah, I mean, they are available, but I mean, ideally, finger joining is a way to utilize small lengths. And finger joining ought to be done, in my opinion, ought to be done here in India. So, if you buy a shop grade, for instance, you recover the shorter clear lengths that you need for your furniture manufacturing, and then you further sort the shorter offcuts and you finger joint those. And by finger joining, you actually increase the strength of the board, believe it or not. Now, a finger joint can be actually stronger than a solid lumber. So it's a way of utilizing waste, and it's better done here as a recovery factor rather than buying those finger joint boards. But yes, you can buy them. You can buy finger joint lumber from British Columbia, and generally, believe it or not, it's a bit more expensive than solid lumber as a rule.
Yeah, so finger joint are engineered boards. और आपकी जानकारी के लिए मैं बता दूं कि हाँ, finger joint board फिलहाल Canadian wood species में Western Hemlock और Yellow Cedar दो species में available है. और फिलहाल it is manufactured at Gurgaon only with one manufacturer, but there are 4 others who have initiated making of these boards, and soon they will be available also in Canadian wood species. But at the moment, the answer is yes. 18 and 25 millimeters are the 2 sizes available with one.
Oh, we're talking about panels, are we?
Yeah, FJAG boards, the finger joint boards.
Yeah.
So those boards are available with one manufacturer, yes, and in 2 species, Hemlock and Yellow Cedar. But there are more to come. Question about which species are suitable for door frames. We just, I'll ask Peter to answer that, but just to let you know, we also will have a session specifically on doors, windows, and door jambs. Okay, and that's sometime we'll declare the date pretty soon. So this session is focused on furniture, but I'll ask Peter to explain you quickly about what species are apt for door jambs.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, if you finger joint a door jamb, it's probably stronger and stiffer than a solid door jamb, actually. Now, that question I answered, I was talking about individual finger jointed boards, which yes, you can buy. But if the question was talking about finger joint edge glued panels, that's different again. So finger jointed edge glued panels, yes, that's another product. Gives a lot of versatility both in furniture and door jambs, and we'll talk about that more in the next session.
Yeah, so we have a question. Next question, what's the minimum diameter that you would suggest for furniture legs, and how about the thickness of the dining table? What kind of minimum thickness you would recommend for that, and whether to use vertical grain or flat grain for that furniture legs?
So furniture legs, typically they'll be a 3x3, but if they're kind of an angled leg or a certain type of leg, grain orientation is really quite important. So the grain orientation really needs to run from the top to the bottom in a kind of longitudinal way, because if it runs the wrong way, you can risk breaking a leg. But I'm talking about solid legs would be 3x3, and more delicate fine work, say legs for a small table or coffee table. Then you need to choose the grain, and vertical grain or something that runs along longitudinally from top to bottom, that's the best. In terms of tabletops, vertical grain is best practice. I know that people actually prefer to have a flat grain look on a tabletop. I totally get that. So if you want that flat grain look, then this grain orientation I talked about becomes really important. So in terms of size, it's better to use the actual natural size that you're buying. So in hemlock, for instance, a natural size would be 2-inch thickness. Now, by the time you dry that and dress it, it becomes closer to 40 millimeter than 50 millimeter. So you end up with a 42 millimeter tabletop. I think that's ideal. But I tend to sort of not suggest 1 inch. 1 inch becomes a bit thin. So 1.5 to 2 inch thickness works.
Yeah, so I think we're running out of time. Just one last question, and then I move on. All other questions will be answered. That's our promise. Don't worry. We have your email IDs. We'll get back to you. It's about whether any chemical treatments are used in this wood lumber species, and what kind of treatment you recommend for Western Hemlock species, preservative treatment.
Well, no chemical treatments required for indoor furniture as a rule. If you wanted to use hemlock for externally for outdoor furniture, then yes, I'd recommend treatment. And hemlock treats quite well, it pressure treats well. So it's a question of if you want to chemically treat the wood against termites and decay and mold and so on, you can. All these species accept treatment. But generally, it's not required indoors. It's only required if it's going to be outdoors. And of course, generally, chemical treatment is going to put some sort of colour in the wood. So, you know, you need to be painting it or staining it to sort of make it look nice after treatment.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I think we have just overshot the time by a few seconds. Thank you so much again for the wonderful participation. Over to you, Nirmala.
Yeah, thank you, Ajay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you once again for taking time out to attend this webinar hosted by Canadian Wood. I know you all must have many questions. We can see that in the Q&A panel itself that were not answered today. But like Ajay said, we have captured all these and these will be documented and we will come back to you via email. Also, if you would like to view this webinar again, please feel free to do so. It will be uploaded on our YouTube channel and we could also share the link with you. If you still like to know more about us, do not hesitate to reach out to us or contact any of our business development managers. Please do go through our website. We have a lot of information available out there, and we are just, if you think you still need more, we'll be most happy to entertain your inquiries. As stated by Pranesh in the beginning, this is just part one of the best practices series. We'll be hosting another session on door and door frame shortly. Please keep in touch, and I think we will look forward to seeing you again. Just a small request, after the webinar, you will receive a survey link from Canadian Wood sent directly to you at your registered email ID. Request you to please fill the feedback form and share back with us. Feedback and suggestions or on topics or anything are most welcome. Thank you for again attending, and with this we end the webinar. Thanks.